Ted Bundy was not only a serial killer, he was practically the serial killer archetype. Intelligent, well-spoken, and handsome, he killed 20 known victims. Still, when his end came, he expressed the same kind of basic human fear as anyone else. At this point, Ted Bundy is more of a monster in our collective historical memory than a person, and while it's admittedly hard to think of him expressing terror and remorse, this is precisely how it seems he spent the night before his death. Bundy didn't sit and stare at the wall without feeling leading up to his January 24, 1989 electrocution. By all accounts, he spent the night weeping and praying, as the Los Angeles Times reported at the time. Whether or not he was weeping and praying for his own soul or the souls of his victims is anyone's guess. That being said, Bundy did give an interview with psychologist James Dobson before being executed that more or less reflects a contrite attitude, at least if we believe what Bundy said. In the interview, he describes having woken up from being, quote, possessed by something so awful and alien. He said that he remembered being responsible, quote, in the eyes of the law and certainly in the eyes of God. Speaking of his murders and other crimes, he also said that he was horrified that he was capable of doing something like that.
Part of the shock and horror for my dear friends and family years ago when I was first arrested was that there was no clue.
It's said that nothing is as potent as a mother's love. In Bundy's case, that love was apparently potent enough to shroud Bundy's mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, from the truth, at least for a while. Cowell told the News Tribune in 1980, Ted Bundy does not go around killing women and little children. She also defended her son, saying, quote, and I know this too, that our never-ending faith in Ted, our faith that he is innocent, has never wavered, and it never will. Eventually, it seems that Cowell came to accept her son's actions, at least following Bundy's confession. After that, Cowell still kept in contact with her son and spoke to him twice on the phone before he was executed. We have no way to know what they talked about, of course, but we do know that Bundy and his mother shared a close, even possessive relationship. As a child, Bundy grew jealous of his mother's burgeoning relationship with her future husband, Johnny Bundy, who eventually adopted Ted and gave him his last name. This, by the way, came after Bundy grew up thinking that his mother was his sister, as Cowell was seemingly ashamed of being a single mother. Such a relationship, when combined with visions of Bundy boning his mother before death, paints a complex and grim portrait. Death row inmates' last meals truly run the gamut. Some people, like Gary Carl Simmons, ordered a final meal of nearly 30,000 calories in 2012, including 2 pizzas, McDonald's French fries, 2 pints of ice cream, and much more. Others, like Velma Barfield, asked for nothing more than a Coca-Cola and a bag of cheese doodles before her end came in 1984. Ted Bundy, however, didn't make any specific requests, and so he was given Florida State Prison's default final meal, something akin to a breakfast you might find in front of a hefty eater in a New England diner: steak, eggs, hash browns, toast with jam and butter, coffee, and juice. But rather than chowing down, Bundy didn't touch it at all. By itself, it's not necessarily troubling that Bundy didn't eat his final meal. In fact, some people might cheer or jeer at that fact, or say that Bundy didn't deserve the food. But it's a bit disturbing to imagine even the most ruthless killer sitting in a cell and awaiting their appointed death, too terrified or possibly detached from reality to even lift a hand to touch their food.
Bye, Ted Bundy, goodbye.
It's one thing to be relieved or grateful that a highly dangerous psychopathic person has been removed from human society, and another thing entirely to cheer on that person's death. Of course, those personally affected by Bundy's actions, like the family members of his victims, had far more of an understandable reason to express joy over his execution than others. But for 500 random members of the public to care enough to travel to and gather outside of Florida State Prison to gleefully await the happy news that Bundy had had 2,000 volts of electricity cast into his body, such behavior cast a disturbing scenario in an even more disturbing light. The crowd outside of Florida State Prison chanted "Burn, Bundy, burn" in the hours leading up to his death. When a witness to Bundy's execution ran outside to inform the crowd of what had happened, people cheered, sang, banged pans together, and hugged each other. When Bundy's time came, he was escorted to his execution looking ashen, as the Los Angeles Times described in 1989. He sat down in Florida State Prison's wooden electric chair, his typical bravado completely drained away. His arms and legs were strapped into place as he stared out through the glass window at 42 people on the other side, including some of his prosecutors. He nodded to the people whom he recognized, mouthed something inaudible, and bowed his head. Like others facing electrocution, Bundy's head was shaved. It's typically the case that those facing electrocution have their heads shaved along with the calf of one leg to permit electricity to be better conducted. His shaved head also glistened from ointment, which helped electrodes transmit current through his body. When asked if he had any last words, Bundy simply said, "I'd like to give my love to my family and friends." Soon after, Bundy's mouth and chin were covered with a heavy strap. Next, executioners affixed a metal-fitted electrode to the top of his head with an attached black veil that hung down to cover the notorious face that managed to charm so many. When the electrocutioner pushed the button, Bundy's hands and body tightened, and smoke lifted from his leg. A minute later, the 2,000 volts of current were switched off, and a doctor listened for Bundy's heartbeat. At 7:16 a.m., right around when the sun came up over Florida, Bundy was pronounced dead.